Glad you like the team idea.
I sure do. How are we doing, everyone? This is John Lynch, director of the Stafford Fitness Center. Thanks for joining me. This is the final installment of PHIT, applying the Fibonacci sequence to fitness. Appreciate you joining me. And if you're a person who's been on here the last few sessions, this will be a really nice way to tie everything all together and kind of bridge us going forward into the spring with some different solutions for fitness that might help everyone. So anyway, just to revise, not revise, just a recap, I should say. We went over in the first session the human condition, how we share a bunch of things, similarly, breathing posture, physiology. We identified that pathology, and we did some sagittal plane competency drills. In the second session last week, we talked about manipulating posture, what stress does to the body, why it does that. And then we did some frontal plane competency drills. And then today, we're going to kind of tie it all together with some pretty philosophical points using mathematical concepts as sacred geometry and spiral lines. We'll talk about the golden ruler, what that is and what that means, fractal patterning, and then how we apply all this stuff to fitness. And we'll do some transverse plane competency today, which is kind of a combination between sagittal and frontal. And just to review one more time, because this really does tie it all together, but stress is the disruption of homeostasis, right? Any and all stress that you perceive in your life is affecting your body, and that causes adaptation on a continuous basis. The stress responses help us navigate the world. They used to keep us alive, and now they hold us accountable, but they're a little bit different than how they used to be. At this point, it's posture that affects us, and it causes a lot of suboptimal situations in our body because of the way muscles are organized, which are an interconnected set of pulleys. When one turns off, another one turns on, and vice versa. Those muscle chains run in spiral lines, which we'll really get into talking about today. Those lines are connected by fascia, which means that one muscle connects to another one and affects another one in a certain way. Those spiral lines are also found in nature, that the same way that they are in the body. And we'll talk about how the algorithm of PHI can help us to derive some interventions for helping chronic stress. So a lot to unpack. All right, so this is the fun part, right? The golden ruler. And before you get into what you see on the image on the left, I just want to talk about what the Fibonacci sequence is. This is something that I started to learn about just a few years ago, really. It wasn't until after, about 10 or 12 years in the field of strength and conditioning that I started to look a little bit deeper at what we were doing and why it affected us in a certain way. And this has just kind of been a rabbit hole that I've been exploring ever since. But the Fibonacci sequence essentially is if you start with a 0 and 1 and you add those two numbers together, and then you keep doing that over time, you get this sequence. So 0 plus 1 is 1, then 1 plus 1 is 2, then 1 plus 2 is 3, and you can read that right there, and it goes just continually on. So this is what math calls an irrational mathematical constant, similar to pi, but it's just a number that's never ending. It's expressed in a decimal by 1.681, I believe, and then just repeating, or 618 rather. And it can be applied to every dimensional scale: weight, distance, temperature, frequency, just a means of physics. The interesting thing about this constant is that when any pair of those adjacent numbers is divided, the outcome will achieve an increasing accuracy to phi, right? So as you can see in the graph in the middle, 2 divided by 1, 3 divided by 2, 5 divided by 3, and as you go down the line, you always get 1.618 and then repeating closer to that mathematical constant. So what I just think is important to appreciate right now, which we'll get into a little bit more toward the end of this presentation, is that if you look at these two graphs, the graph on the left and the graph in the middle on the bottom, the graph on the left expresses that number kind of from a top down or a bottom up perspective. So if you were to look at a pyramid, you wouldn't know if you were looking at it from the top or the bottom, if you could see right through it because of the way it's organized. So that's kind of that picture on the left. And then the picture on the right, that graph that kind of goes up and down, is looking at that same pyramid from a side angle. All right. So what we'll talk about in terms of movement and energy and things like that is really a combination of looking at these two graphs together in a three-dimensional aspect. And just kind of getting into the next concept is the picture on the bottom right, how phi, you can see phi or the golden ratio in the human body. And I'll show you another set of pictures in a minute that'll help you relate to it in nature. But the idea here is that atomic particles kind of arrange themselves in a certain way, and it follows this pattern. And so without getting too deep into it, which you could talk for days about, just appreciate that. So the organization of the fingers is, that same ratio, the organization of the arm bone to the next arm bone, or really any way, and I'll kind of go into it at this point. So let me switch slides here. Okay, so we call that a fractal pattern, and a fractal just means ratio, right? So the same way that something presents itself at a small scale is equal to the way it presents itself at a large scale. So hopefully you can take some of these pictures on the far right to appreciate that, where, the organization of a rose petal follows this golden spiral, the organization of a whirlpool, right? How water spirals and flows is really a fractal comparison to the patterns of weather on the Earth, or even the galaxy. So there's a lot there, obviously, and that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But the fractal pattern exists from the smallest scale to the largest scale, and because of that, the human body is encapsulated in that. So in terms of the Vitruvian Man, which is really the point of this slide, is to appreciate how that golden ratio appears within our body, and how we can use certain techniques or philosophical approaches to movement to achieve optimal positioning of bones and muscles and the like. So just paying attention to the ratios, right? So if you look at the Vitruvian Man, just in terms of the head and face, you can see here the chin to the nostrils is a third of the face. The nostrils to the eyebrows are a third of the face. The eyebrow to the hairline is a third of the face. The complete face is 1/10 of the body. All right, and you can read it how it's organized in the body, all right here. But this basically is what I like to think of as the most perfect architectural structure for the human body. And how do you line up to that structure? Because not everybody's the same, obviously. People's arms are longer, legs are longer, torso is shorter, or whatever it is. Basically the concept here, which you can see right at the very bottom, is just that deviance from these ratios results in varying leverage inefficiencies in the respective joints. So compared to the Vitruvian model, if you've got longer femurs or thigh bones, then you are going to have an inefficient or a harder time getting action at the hip or action at the knee to happen. And obviously those joints connect two sets of bones. So however it might be at one set of joints is going to be the equal and opposite at another set of joints. So just a lot of kind of basic and general assessments that I'll use to kind of distinguish different movement strategies for different people, but also that I want to help you understand about your body as we move forward in the spring. Next is fractal patterning, kind of in another sense, and that is how energy flows. And so this big image on the top right is called a torus. Like a torus energy flow is another way to talk about it. But everybody knows that all matter is in constant motion, right? So I'm sitting here looking at a computer. The matter that makes up that computer is constantly moving. It's just the reality of physics. And so this model is kind of how that's happening from an energy standpoint. And the body isn't a whole lot different. In the bottom section where you see those five pictures there are just some examples of what that torus energy flow might look like for, different entities. But the thing that I really think is important to recognize here is that dynamic flow of energy over time is really following that Fibonacci sequence, right? It's a four-dimensional spiraling. So what do I mean by four-dimensional? Well, you've got your three planes of motion, and in terms of biomechanics, it's sagittal, frontal, and then transverse, which is diagonal or rotational, and then over time. Okay, so over time kind of draws another dimension in that scale. Some examples of this are the way that protons and electrons revolve around a nucleus, planets revolve around the sun, the Earth's polarity and magnetic north. So you can see the Earth in that picture. Like, why does the Earth spin the way it spins? Why doesn't it spin the other way? Why doesn't it spin on a horizontal plane? And then finally, human gait mechanics. So we'll talk about it as we go forward in the spiral muscle chains, but human gait mechanics happen in a rotational aspect, and muscles spiral. So that's kind of in the bottom section there. The way that the muscles spiral are actually they're interconnected, obviously, which we talked about in the last session. And that dynamic stability is consistent with the spiraling of that Fibonacci sequence, or the rectangular pattern that you saw in the last couple of slides. When you're walking in gait, for example, upper body works in reciprocation to the lower. So if the left foot steps forward, the right arm swings forward, and vice versa, right? So you can think of the middle of your body as kind of the middle of that torus, and what's happening on the bottom is opposite to the flow of energy that's happening on the top. And then just something I think is interesting, and I thought I'd bring it up, is that if you're looking at this torus, it's like a donut. You have this section in the middle that's kind of not really a part of that energy flow. And I think it's interesting to think about the digestive tract in the same way, where you would think of your stomach as inside your body, your gut's inside your body. But if you think of it in terms of there's a hole that things go in and a hole that things go out, then really the space inside of that tubing is kind of the outside of your body, not really the inside. So another philosophical point, and just interesting to think about. So we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this. But in terms of how we apply PHI, or the concepts of PHIT, to fitness, basically, like we talked about in previous session, stress causes the muscles of the back to tighten, and that is called sympathetic tone. So if you look in the small upper right hand diagram here, you're going to see those two long stretches of muscle that go between the rib and the hip. That is what I'm talking about, where those constrict down and tighten. And when that happens, then the muscles then in the front, or what you can see in the larger picture where they cross kind of over the middle, just above the belly button, that section of muscle in result of that is going to relax. Remember the biotensegrity structure where the rubber bands are holding the wooden tubes together? Well, when the back contracts, the front cannot. Well, it could, but the front normally would relax. So in optimal positioning, you've got work on both sides that are equal and opposite. In most cases, and certainly if you're sedentary or if you're sitting quite often, then that back being tight is also the core being weak and pulled on. So I kind of got into the second point there. When that happens, you lose proficient rotation, and then you gain compensatory movement, right? So remember that your body's constantly adapting to everything you put it through. So if what you're doing all the time is sitting at a desk, and you're not kind of offloading that or contrasting it with some type of physical activity, resistance training or something else, then the adaptation that your body is going through is that of sitting and a singular position. So that causes loss of rotation, but it doesn't mean that you don't rotate. Now, instead, if I'm sitting in my chair and I go to turn to the right, or if I go to turn to the left, or even now that I stand up and I go to do the motions of my normal life, well, they still occur, but they just occur differently than how they should be occurring in an organism that was built, millions of years ago that didn't sit all the time. So even though the tasks that we do have changed significantly, the structure of our body and the way things kind of happen, and that flow of stress to compensation really hasn't changed. So the strategies that get the job done will be accommodated and adapted to, right? So if you do a good job and you sit all day and you do a good job at your job, then that's a signal to your brain that, hey, you did a good job and I'm going to keep on doing that. But physically, it's just not a good situation to be in. And, essentially this continual, compensation pattern and, sitting and adapting to that causes what I call like a spin out of control of those alignments. Okay, so it's you do something bad, but you adapt to it in a positive way. So then you do something bad better. And so now we'll talk a little bit about how to actually get out of some of those situations. All right, so here we go. All right, cool. So just if you could just pin Coach Lynch to my left here, my phone camera, and we'll kind of talk about this. So we'll go back through the tall seated position. So remember, on the edge of the chair, call it the sit bones, right? The two bones of the ischium, and you can feel those bones kind of in the bottom of your butt sitting on the edge of your chair. And you just want to feel them evenly, okay? A lot of people might feel that left side a little bit more because you're oriented into the right, but just try to feel them evenly, and that's going to help you to kind of start in the right position. Lower the chair as much as possible. I already did this when I started the session, but remember, if your hips are higher than your knees, so my hip is down here. If my hip is higher than my knee, then I'm going to have tension already in my hip flexor, which is going to make this drill a little bit less efficient. So lower the chair as much as you possibly can. I'm going to move it back a little bit so you can see my feet. But just make sure that you can feel your feet on the ground, your knees. You want to kind of just be right in line with your toes. So if I'm turning directly to the side, we look like this. It's not awful if you're out here, but it just puts a little bit more stretch on that hamstring, and the hamstring is one of the muscles that we want to get to contract in sagittal plane competency. So we'll try to get the toes kind of right in line with the knees, and then just think about keeping your feet flat. And if you did a good job of this the last couple times, then today, think about just pushing down into the ground with your feet evenly, right? Not too much toe, not too much heel. Evenly down into the ground, like a 1 or 2 out of 10. If you go too hard, you're going to get work in that hip flexor, and we don't want that. Okay? Just push down gently. If you do it right, you're going to feel the hamstring come on. You're going to feel your butt start to work. Okay? Another thing for the hamstring, and this is a little bit more advanced, is try to pull the heels back toward the chair. All right, so if you do have these wheels that you can get maybe set up, now if your heel comes up, no good. But if you can get your feet against your wheels of your chair with your feet flat, then maybe you can pull into the wheels, but really isn't that big of a deal. Just try to feel some of this pulling tension with your feet to get the hamstring to fire. Okay. With the arms, remember, position the armrests right about where you can barely touch them with your elbows. And actually, I had a person who had been in our last session who mentioned to me earlier today, that they didn't have this armrest that they could do that with. It was too far back. If that's the case for you, then you can just go ahead and reach straight down. It's not really that big of a deal. You're just trying to avoid being in the shrug position, because remember, when you shrug, that upper trap is pulling the ribs up, and it's the same thing as the low back being tight, and that's going to kind of skew the pattern. So you can go straight down, or you can even go hands on your knees and just reach like downward with the elbows, and you're going to feel some muscular work in the rib, and that's going to be the same thing that we're trying to go for with the armrests. So for today, I'll go ahead and do that in case anybody needs to see how that looks. but I'll just go hands on the knees and then elbows kind of reaching down as if I'm trying to touch my thigh with my elbows. And if you can, then go ahead and push your elbows right into your thigh. And now we got to think about the breathing. Okay. So if you need to move your hands, I'll turn. If you need to move your hands to remind yourself about the breathing, right? Index finger and thumb on your collarbone. And then with that sort of right hand, then with your left hand, put your thumb right on the middle of that sternum and against the right hand, and just take a couple breaths in, and I'll go with you now. I like to close my eyes during that because it helps me to think about where the air is going, right? Take away a stimulus of the eyes and then think about where that air is going. Remember, if you breathe in and your ribs come up, then when you breathe, you want to, well, when you exhale, you want to let your rib drop. And then when you breathe in, you want to breathe in your back. So we're just doing the opposite of what's normal for your body because that can help to spin that spiral the opposite way. If when you breathe in, your back expands, right? For the people who are having this on a normal basis, having the back expand, then when you exhale, just think about pushing down with those elbows or reaching down with the elbows. And when you breathe in, breathe right into that hand. Okay, so if your back expands normally, you want to try to get air in the front. So the only concept there is wherever air goes normally, we just want to try to get air into a different space in our lungs because that's going to help to alleviate the compensation pattern that you're feeling on a normal basis. Okay, good. So remember, that's the sagittal plane competency. Okay, so feet down, pulling in with the hamstrings, maybe feeling some core as I push down and I exhale well, obliques. Okay. And then where's the air go? And get the air to go into the opposite space. If it's in the front, get it in the back. If it's in the back, get it in the front. We're going to build on that. And I'm going to remind you now about the frontal plane competency. So it's the same exact thing. We have two more cues to review next with the same breathing. And as long as you got the feeling of the breathing, then you can move your hands and you can just go with your hands here or here, whatever you want. Okay, right now, same idea. Inhale, expand. I would normally go here, so I'm going to try to go in my back. Exhale, ribs down. And on that exhale, I feel all these muscles coming together. And then as I breathe in again, I'm going to try to just shift my hips, right? So I'm just going to go right here, left hip pulled back. You can also think of it as the thigh pulling back. All right, let's see if you can see that well. I'm going to turn this way so I can see. So basically, I'm just trying to get this left knee behind the right knee. And you can see my chair kind of turn. You don't really want your chair to turn. Just think about pulling back and reaching forward with that left and right. Okay, this is going to give you left groin, so you're going to feel it way inside that left, inside left thigh, all the way into where it attaches on your hip, and you might also feel the outer edge of your right hip. So this is groin and glute med, two muscles that are critical to the stabilizing of your hip joint. If you're still following along and you're in that, add in the left hip hike, right? So push that right sit bone down into the chair a little bit harder than the left and lift that left hip up toward your rib. You might also feel like you're getting a little bit of a left side bend. That's perfect. Okay. So if you're following along still, excellent job. That's a lot definitely to go through. And you do want to string these things together, right? You really can't work on frontal plane competency until you have sagittal plane competency. And we're going to now talk about transverse plane competency, which is basically the combination of sagittal and frontal plane, and then going into some upper body mechanics. Okay, so for today, and I'll just quickly talk about what the upper body is going to do, and then we'll reel it all back together one time. Okay, so what we'll do is we're gonna just go with a right arm reach and a left arm pull. And what I mean by reach is like I'm going to turn this way. I'm really trying to get this arm to go as far forward as I can, but I'm not turning my body. Okay, I'm just going here and reach like that. So it's a shoulder blade kind of action. Okay, with the left arm, it's the same exact thing except the opposite motion. Okay, so if the right arm is reaching forward, then the left arm is just pulling back, pulling back. So I didn't really turn. All right, I just went reach, pull. And that positioning of the shoulder blade is going to affect the muscle chain in the front so that you can get the stimulation we want to try to get in the sagittal plane, in the transverse plane. All right, so we'll go all the way back through it. Here's what you're going to do. Follow along with me. We're going to just spend 1 or 2 breaths on each section, and then we'll go into this, the transverse plane competency. Okay, so feet flat, pull back just slightly. Okay, hands on the knees or on the armrest. Inhale, expand. Exhale out. Next, inhale, shift back with the left knee. Next inhale, lift the left hip. Okay, right now, inhale, reach right. Exhale, pull left. And let's just hold that position for a few seconds. Okay, every breath in now, I'm trying to go further forward with my right hand, more back with my left. And as you string together these breaths, you should feel like the range is getting better. Keep the hamstring on the left leg especially and pulling that left knee back. Okay, and now all we're going to do is on the next exhale, we're going to twist a little bit to the left. So it's inhale, reach. Exhale, pull, and just my whole spine is turning left. Right there. Inhale, reach again. Pull back. And you're trying to match the left elbow pull to the left groin pull. Good. Try to hold the position. And now we're just going to switch sides. So it's going to be left arm reach. Inhale. I'll turn. Exhale, right arm pull. This time shifting back in the right side. Inhale, reach. Exhale, pull. And I'm just feeling that all across. All right. So I hope that you're able to get some of that. And I know that's a lot in just a short period of time. The idea there is as you start to rotate and the ribs turn one way and the hips turn the other way, then you are requiring these muscles in the front that you saw in that spiral muscle chain to turn on. And that activation of the muscles in the front will subsequently force the muscles in the back, particularly in the low back, to have to relax. And then you are restoring the tension, that length tension relationship between the muscles in the front and the back. Okay, so a couple minutes left. And just remember, this is being recorded. And so once I get it all processed, it'll be on YouTube and you'll be able to click back on that and review the techniques. Okay. All right, so we'll just finish it out here with a little bit of motivational stuff. So this is a system, right? PHIT is a system that I developed from the concepts that we have reviewed in the last few sessions, and the employment of this system into your life, which can be done seated in real time. And we will also offer various sessions in January and moving forward to give you the information on how to do this when you're standing, how to do it when you're walking, how to do it when you're doing resistance training. Will help you to alleviate the problems that you're having from these chronic pains or bad postures, and also become more robust so that they don't happen further on down the line. And remember that muscles hold emotional stress. So if you can be better at having good posture and the competencies of the various planes, then you will also be able, believe it or not, to reduce mental stress in your life. Okay. But you do have to make the choice in real time to be that best version of yourself. Okay. Take 30 seconds or a minute once an hour and go over those things, because even that little amount of time is just going to tell your brain, hey, that hamstring should be working. Hey, that oblique should be working. Hey, the low back can relax. Everything's fine. And you doing that a little bit of the time where you never did that before will be hugely impactful to you. I always like to say the distance between 0 and 1 is infinitely longer than the distance between 1 and 2, because 0 is you're starting from nowhere, right? At least when you're at from 1 to 2, you know the distance. So that's 30 minutes. That's FIT. That's the final session. Like I said, this will be available later, but I do want to just say thank you very much to everybody who's been a part of this. Super fun for me to put together, and I'm excited to bring some of these philosophies to you in real time so that we can help you out, make you feel better, and make you more productive and everything else. So thanks again, and appreciate you joining in, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.